because your wife believes something that you must believe that too is just specious. It doesn't track.
It's not, but you're not, these aren't random people. Your husband is a Supreme Court justice. A flag is being flown in front of your house that represents support for a movement that is going to have a lot of relevant Supreme Court cases coming before. It could be some of the most consequential Supreme Court cases in U.S. history. It doesn't say in which the justice's impartiality is undoubtedly questioned.
Making these accusations against the Supreme Court, saying it's been obliterated. Do you worry that it is eroding trust in the institution?
It's already at an all-time low.
Yeah, so I watched your conversation with Dan, Pisco, Lycan, and Josiah on the Alito thing. Do you still stand by your statement that you think he should have recused himself?
On stuff relating to the election? Yeah, probably.
Yeah, the January 6th, stop the steal, all that, right?
Probably, yeah.
If he doesn't, do you still stand by the statement that you said he should be impeached if he refuses?
Yeah, I think if you're supposed to recuse yourself and you don't, then you should probably be gone, right? Yeah.
Well, give me 1 second. Yeah, no, I understand that. I just think that impeachment is like a step above, right? Like, I think there could be questions about whether you should or shouldn't recuse himself, and if the area is gray, but impeachment is like almost a step above. But I guess let's start by just telling me why you think Alito should recuse himself for what happened.
I feel like so if there was a flag that's hung up outside of your house for some period of time that seems to not only declare like a political position, but like a support for a particular like policy position that you might rule on, and then people see it and then it's publicized in the media and then you've got to make big rulings on it, I feel like that undermines the legitimacy of the court quite a bit. I feel like that's probably not a good thing to do. Yeah.
So if you had a situation where you were on the Supreme Court and you saw this flag flying at your domicile, it'd probably be appropriate for you to ask the person that flew the flag to take it down, yes?
Yeah, or recently like a stranger like came up and flew it, or what do you mean?
No, just whoever flew the flag, right? Whether it be someone you live with.
I would probably take it down myself. I would probably run there screeching and take it down, yeah.
Run there screeching and take it down. I just think that, again, like you've read his letter, and Alito's claim that it wasn't him that flew the flag, that his wife instead flew that flag. And when he found out that his wife was flying that flag, he insisted that she take it down. They argued about it for a few days, and eventually she relented. I think that's enough, right, to make it a bit unreasonable to call for his recusal. No, I won't even use a bit. I think it's ludicrous to call for his recusal when it's not something he did, right? It's not a statement he made. And when he saw that statement being made by his wife, he asked her to stop doing that. And I think that to imply that because it took a little longer than you would have liked for him to take it down, that it requires or he should be expected to recuse himself, I just don't buy that.
Do you think a reasonable person could see you flying a flag? Well, here's the first question. If a reasonable person, when I say reasonable, I don't mean they have their correct, just like an ordinary person that's of sound mind and judgment, saw a flag flying outside of your house that said, I support policy A, and then policy A was on the docket for the Supreme Court to rule on, do you think a reasonable person could see that and think, I don't know if I trust your writing on this? I feel like you might be biased.
Sure.
Okay.
I can understand why that might be the case.
Okay.
But the standard for recusal isn't, I think you might be biased. That's not the standard.
I think it is, actually.
Well, we can read it if you'd like.
It's the appearance of, if there's an appearance of impartiality by a reasonable person.
No, not quite. So in Alito's letter, I'm going to just quote from the letter here in the disqualification section. I'll just read it for us so we can go through. So B, disqualification section 1 says, a justice is presumed impartial and his obligation to sit unless disqualified. Section 2, a justice should disqualify himself or herself in a proceeding in which the justice's impartiality might reasonably be questioned, that is, where an unbiased and reasonable person who is aware of all relevant circumstances would doubt that the justice could fairly discharge his or her duties. And there's a substantive difference there between it might be that you have a bias here versus I don't think you're capable of being unbiased. And that's the difference in the standards. Because, and let me explain myself.
Well, I don't think that standard isn't they're not capable of being biased. Is that I think a reasonable person who's aware of all the circumstances, I think, could question your impartiality. I don't think that's
would doubt that you could fairly discharge your duties. No, not just question your impartiality, but doubt that you are capable of being impartial.
What's the difference between those two things? There's a substantive
difference to these things.
What's the difference?
No, I'm saying there's a substantive difference.
Yeah, I'm asking what the difference is. Wait, also, can you link me this so I can read the exact words again? So I can have one screen.
Give me a second. Yeah. Hold on. I'm taking it from the Alito letter, right? He quoted it for me. If he's misquoting it, then I'm going to get egg on my face, but I don't think he is. So the difference here is I can make an argument that let's take the justice in the Trump case in New York. Because he donated to Democratic operatives and for Democratic causes and to Democratic candidates, I can reasonably make an argument that he might not be impartial when it comes to ruling on the Trump case, that he might have some biases that make it hard for him to be impartial on these cases.
Wait, who are we talking about right now?
The judge, I forget his name, in the Trump case on New York, where he's going through that, right? Again, he's made donations to Democratic causes and things like that. I don't think he needs to step down because he is still, again, capable of being impartial.
Well, I don't know what it's a whole different forum. I don't know what the standards are for that. Are we talking about are you talking about like a federal court case in in a New York district? Or are you talking about like the state, like the New York courts, the state courts, or?
I don't know if it's federal or state. Are you saying that these are substantively different to you, that the standards are different here?
Probably.
I don't know if they are.
I guess I'm just trying to be clear. Because like, for instance, like the Supreme Court isn't going to be making like rulings on like on criminal cases or something like that, right? So
fair.
But so I guess just coming back to the text of this, okay? So a justice should disqualify himself or herself in a proceeding in which the justice's impartiality might reasonably be questioned. That is, where an unbiased and reasonable person who's aware of all relevant circumstances would doubt that the justice could fairly discharge his or her duties. So a justice should disqualify themselves if a person might question their impartiality, right? They're not sure if they could fairly discharge his or her duties, or they would doubt that you could fairly discharge his or her duties because the impartiality might be reasonably questioned, right? I think that yeah, go ahead.
Let me give you an example of where that would be the case, right? So if, for example, the court case in question would directly impact a family member. So say Alito's wife had broken in to the Capitol, right, on January 6th. Yes, a reasonable person would look at that and say, I don't know if you can actually be impartial in this case, so I think you should probably sit this one out, buddy, because the ruling would directly materially impact the welfare of your family member, right? That's pretty clear-cut, I think that's a pretty easy example of a case where, yes, I think any reasonable person would say, yeah, sure, that's unbiased. But in this case specifically, we're looking, again, it's anyone who's aware of all relevant circumstances. Mm-hmm. And the relevant circumstances include the fact that Alito didn't make this statement. Well, Alito didn't fly this flag. Alito asked the flag to be taken down, meaning that he didn't consent to it, right? And I think that I just don't think you can be reasonable and still say that that person cannot be unbiased in this.
Okay. I mean, I disagree. I don't know.
Sure. Okay. Fair. I just look. You and Dan triggered the fuck out of me. Okay, because Dan basically made up a story. Okay, made up a story about how they were in cahoots. That him, Alito, and his wife wanted to fuck over the liberals. Okay.
I think that's still true. Yeah, but I'm not even arguing.
Why do you think that's true though?
Because the idea that you're a Supreme Court justice and you're allowing your wife to fly politically charged flags outside of your house in one of the most tumultuous periods in U.S. history, and you're unaware of it and you're taking days to take it down, in that case, I don't know, there's another clause for retardation, but like if you're that stupid, you probably shouldn't be ruling on these cases as well.
Okay, first of all, he didn't allow it to happen. In fact, he was fighting with his wife, at least from his statements, and I tend to believe him on this, right? Unless you have evidence that he's lying here, that he is wanting it taken down. He's arguing for it to be taken down. I don't like this. Let's remember that no reporting was being done on this. The only reporting that happened on this was in 2024 when the New York Times released the story in May. And in fact, the Washington Post had this story, right? They chose not to run it for 3 years. They said that they were sitting on this story for 3 years. They didn't think it was a big deal, and they never read it. So there was no outside pressure at that point in time. There was no political to do about it. No one knew about it even or cared. And in that instance, in that context, he's still calling for her to take it down.
I mean, it's his house. Like it's part of your house. Like
it is.
You don't have to fight anybody
to
take it down. You just take it down, or you
sure, but
have it taken down.
You can understand how it would cause maybe marital stress if you just took down something that your wife wanted up.
Do you not understand how she can cause stress to the integrity of the Supreme Court and to her husband's job by flying an incredibly partisan flag?
Which is why she eventually probably took it down. And in fact, we have recordings of her afterwards, after this incident, saying, okay, I'm not going to fly any more weird flags. I'm going to defer to my husband in this from now on. Again, for the evidence we have, it just sounds like they had a spat about this. They had some kind of argument. It lasted a few days, and eventually she relented and gave in and took it down. That's just the Occam's razor here.
I mean, the I mean, I guess I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think I don't know how we can cross this bridge. I feel like we just agree to disagree. Like the idea that outside of your house, you're flying an incredibly politically partisan flag, and then you have to rule on it. Like you can say here, like, oh, well,
He's
we
not
found
flying it.
You don't know that? It's flying outside of his house. That's all that matters. It's outside of his house for days, right?
For 3 days, yes.
Yeah. So him coming out after saying, oh, well, it wasn't me, it was my wife, that doesn't make me feel any better. Like, how do I know you're not making Supreme Court decisions based on what your wife wants? If you can't even get a flag taken down, but what if your wife is telling you how to vote in these things too? Do you think husbands and wives talk about, their work? Like, she might have a strong opinion on that. Like, the idea that you would even think that it's acceptable to be married to somebody that thinks it's acceptable to fly an incredibly partisan flag about a Supreme Court case that you might have to rule on, I don't know. That's just, I think a reasonable person could doubt. Now, remember, this isn't, you have to be absolutely certain, right? If the standard here was a justice should disqualify himself or herself in a proceeding in which the justice's impartiality is absolutely, unquestionably denied, where an unbiased and reasonable person who's aware of all relevant circumstances would be of absolute certainty that the justice could fairly discharge his or her duties. In that case, I would agree with you. Yeah, like I can't be absolutely certain that he's, that he's lost his impartiality, but could I have doubts? Absolutely. And any reasonable person, I think, can have doubts here for sure. And the impartiality might absolutely be questioned. I think that's fair. Yeah.
The reason that that's not fair and that is a poor standard is because in that case, you can make a stronger case that if that is the standard, that all it takes is a reasonable person to doubt that suspect that there might be bias, that they might not be able to be impartial in this case, then no woman can ever rule or make a ruling on anything regarding Roe v. Wade because the biases that they might have in regard to that would require them to recuse themselves. That's the standard that you're wanting here, that no black person can ever make any ruling regarding any racial issue or racial justice issue because they probably are going to be biased when it comes to that. A reasonable person could assume that a black justice is going to have some biases and may not be able to be impartial when it becomes to, say, racial gerrymandering laws in a state and making a ruling on that. And I just think that that's such a weak standard that it's going to create so many problems that the cure is worse than the disease here. It cannot be that standard.
I think that the impartiality doesn't have to be on every single aspect of your life. We're not asking for somebody to come in as a blank slate. We do want them to be partial in certain ways. If you nominate a Supreme Court justice that you think believes in a textual, strict interpretation of the Constitution, they're going to be more partial to probably more conservative rulings. Or if you put somebody on the bench that you think is a woman or a black person or whatever, they might have a little bit more partiality or whatever, or more perspective, right, for rulings that are in the favor of those rights as well. That's an okay type of experience or partiality to have. What we don't want are people who are like accepting bribes or who might have just a strict political partiality. These are the types of partialities, or these are the types of ideas that we probably don't want impacting.
Yeah. Do you think that Alito was accepting bribes?
Over the flag thing?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Okay. Fair enough.
But I'm saying that I don't know if you have people that are flying flags that are showing, like if Sotomayor was flying a flag, saying like, I'm with her, and then there was a court case that came up over whether or not Kamala Harris supporting something was good or bad. Like, I don't know if I feel like Sotomayor. I think that any reasonable person would look at her flying that flag and go, I don't know if Sotomayor's being impartial here. She's really ruling in the way that she feels is the most fair, consistent, logical way to rule, or if she just is politically a fan of Kamala Harris.
Would you say the same thing if a Jewish Supreme Court justice flew an Israeli flag outside their house? Do you think that they should recuse themselves in all cases regarding anything to do with Israel, or anything to do with like AIPAC or anything Israel related?
When you say Israeli, do you mean like a dual citizen, or do you mean somebody of Israeli descent?
Someone of Israeli. Maybe they have. Their mom was from Israel, right? I don't know if that gives them dual citizenship or not. But
I'm only saying because I think there's a meaningful difference between like an immigrant who is versus somebody that was born in the USA. I think if you're born in America, I don't think that any type of ethnic background or anything should ever be a grounds for recusal. I think that would be really extreme and unfair,
even if they're flying a Jewish, an Israeli flag, right? They're flying the Israeli flag. They obviously say, I support Israel and things like that. Do you think they should be required to recuse themselves? And not them.
Not if they're for an American citizen. No, I don't necessarily think so.
Okay, so in this case, what about the flags that Miss Alito flew, right, makes it substantively different than that?
Because they were flying a flag that was explicitly signaling support for the Stop the Steal movement, which isn't even just politically partisan. It was partisan to a very particular understanding of what the January 6th certification should have looked like.
So how do you know that she was flying that in order to support those causes? Because these flags, the two flags in question were an upside down flag, right? An upside down American flag, signaling distress, which again has history way before the Stop the Steal movement.
Nobody that draws a Nazi sign is drawing it for the peace sign that it used to stand for. It was very obvious that she was supporting the Stop the Steal movement. It was like,
well, in her words, she wasn't. In her words, it was because of an altercation she was having with one of her neighbors. And she is basically just a big fuck you to her. That's the claim that she's making.
Yeah, but it was an altercation relating to like differing political views, right? They were flying like some LGBT flag or whatever, so she wanted to fly a flag that she didn't fly a Nazi flag to say a fuck you to the neighbor. She flew a flag for something that she believed in, right?
That the country was in distress.
Yeah, it was a stop because of how the election was certified.
I mean, you're assuming that. That is
any reasonable person would assume that.
You can make that as
any reasonable person. It's a reasonable person standard. Any reasonable person would make that assumption. Yes.
It is yes. In that case, no, I don't disagree. That's unreasonable to think that it might be that, right? But I don't know if that's enough, given the disconnects that also surround this, right? Because that's not the only disconnect. That's not the only inference we're making here. We're making that inference, which I agree, probably reasonable. I'll give you that. But we're also making an inference and guessing, right, that Alito allowed this to happen.
Which is reasonable.
Again, I don't think that is, especially given the context that he says, no, I had her take it down. And the fact that she did take it down after 3 days, again, in the context of no media pressure, no political pressure, no outside pressure that I'm aware of, unless you have something that shows
you don't
otherwise?
You don't think if you ask 10 people, is it reasonable to assume that if a flag is flying outside of a house that symbolizes a pretty extreme political idea, that the husband and the wife probably both support this idea? You don't think a reasonable person?
I don't know that if that's reasonable, right? Because I'll give you an example in my life, right? I love my mom. My mom's great. She's awesome. She's amazing. I went to visit her down in Florida couple months ago, right? She's a big Trump supporter. She loves Trump. Okay, she's unfortunately been brain poisoned by Fox News. It's a big argument that we have. That doesn't mean that because I lived in that house too during that time, that her flying the Trump is my president.
It's a way different relationship, right?
Yeah, it is a different relationship, but we have examples. Do you know who James Carville is?
Why have I heard this name?
Because he was the political director of Bill Clinton's name. He's a big Democratic operative.
Oh, okay. I don't know who this is, but okay. What about it?
For years. Do you know who his wife is?
Nope.
His wife was George H.W. Bush's political operative and worked on his campaign and worked on Republicans' campaign. They've been happily married for over 20 years now, right? Okay. They are obviously able to negotiate, right, and have very differing political views. They just don't step on each other's toes like that, right?
Yeah, but so these guys, they're political operatives.
Oh, no, let me finish, right? The idea that because your wife believes something that you must believe that too is just specious. It doesn't track.
It's not, but you're not, these aren't random people. Your husband is a Supreme Court justice, and you're flying a flag in front of his house that is...
Which you have to take down.
Yeah, after 3 days. A flag is being flown in front of your house that represents support for a movement that is going to have a lot of relevant Supreme Court cases coming before it. Arguably some of the most cases, hopefully not. Hopefully it ends up not being that consequential, but that could be some of the most consequential Supreme Court cases in U.S. history. I think a reasonable person could look at that and go, ooh, I don't know if I trust this guy ruling on this stuff. You know, he says that he told his wife to take it down. Now, conveniently, obviously, he's going to testify in a way that is helping his case, because why would he not? But I think a reasonable person could look at it and go, oh, you probably kind of agree with this. And I don't know if you should be ruling on these cases. I can have some doubt there. That's all it takes. It's not doubt. Remember, this isn't like beyond a reasonable doubt. We're not talking like criminal conviction levels. It's just, could a reasonable person doubt that the justice could fairly discharge his or her duties?
But again, the standard is, I disagree with you that is the standard. I think you are tamping that down. The standard is higher than that. It's not just, can a reasonable person make this argument and the argument makes sense? It's, can a reasonable person think that there is no other possibility but that this person must be unbiased?
No, that's not what that means.
I just disagree. Because again, the evidence.
It's no. It's if it doesn't say in which the justice's impartiality is undoubtedly questioned. It says
without that the justice could fairly discharge his or her duty.
It says in which the justice's impartiality might reasonably be questioned. That's all it's saying.
Which they explain further. That is, and they explain it where an unbiased and reasonable person who is aware of all relevant circumstances would doubt that the justice could fairly discharge his or her duties, which is a larger standard, a higher standard than, okay, well, maybe there's a question about this. The standard is
they would doubt.
Would doubt.
They would doubt. Not know for certain, not absolutely be aware that it's impossible, not feel with the strongest convictions. Like, that's it. It would doubt.
Yes, but again, that doubt, that level of doubt has to rise to a reasonable level, and I don't think that someone flying a flag outside their house, which, again, the relevant circumstances are, oh, I recognize that it wasn't him that flew it, and oh, I recognize that he actually told her to take it down, is reasonable. I don't think it's reasonable.
That's if we assume that a person would hear that and believe 100% what's being...
Well, that's the standard, that the reasonable person is aware of all relevant circumstances.
We're not aware of all relevant circumstances. It's not like there's like a criminal investigation or anything, right?
Sure, but
we just have the testimony from the Supreme Court justice. That's it.
Code. This is from the Code of Conduct, where, again, an unbiased and reasonable person who is aware of all relevant circumstances. So we're not talking about people who just saw it on the news at a glance, right? We're not talking about people who just heard about it from Josiah, who's been worm-tonguing them and poisoning them against all conservatives and all conservative things.
Let's say it was a 5-4 court, and let's say that before the court, abortion, came back up somehow. It was, somebody was challenging Dobbs again. Let's say that the court ruled against it, and let's say that the next, or ruled in favor, they ruled against Dobbs. They overturned Dobbs. And they brought back, Casey and Roe or some other new abortion protection. And then let's say that the next day, for one day, all of the female Supreme Court justices, there are 5 of them now, were all flying, like, don't tread on me, with a picture of a uterus instead of a snake or something, right? Or let's say they were flying it. Let's say
imagine that flag.
Or let's say they're flying it before the case came before them, right? So they're flying all these flags. Don't tread on my uterus or whatever. And then this case comes before it. And then let's say that people are saying like, wait, hold on. I feel like you guys should have recused yourselves. You're clearly like very politically partisan here. And let's say they were like, oh, actually, those were vandalists. They came to our houses and they flew those flags. Or it was our husbands or our lesbian wives flew these flags, but we took them down in a couple of days. They just all happened to be flying. Do you think a reasonable person could look at that and go, I don't feel like I trust your impartiality here?
Well, the fact that they're women leads me to doubt their impartiality. But fair enough.
Let's say they're men then. Let's say that they're men and they have those flags flying.
I get you. I think that, yes, under those circumstances, there might be more of a question, right? But again, in that case, the time for recusal has passed, right? The time has just, it's done. It's a done deal. What we're talking about.
Let's say that there's a case that's about. I mean, we can change this however you want to make it work. Let's say that the case is on the docket, then it's going to be coming before them. Should they recuse themselves?
I don't think that's enough. I just don't. I think that it has to be, especially if they say that they weren't flying the flags. It wasn't them. It was their wives, right? And they asked their wives, "Hey, please take this down," right? I think in that case, that's enough to show, okay, well, I think that's reasonable. I don't like punishing people for something they didn't do. Well, does that make sense?
I mean, they kind of did do it though, right?
How?
It's a marriage. Like, this is your house. It's representing to the rest of the world the things that you believe in and your values, right? That's what you're putting out to the world. You as a team have certain beliefs, and as a house that represents both of you, that you're both on, if you're hanging something in front of the house, people would expect that it's representing both of you.
But you, especially if it comes to light that you did not want this to happen, it was an argument and you wanted it taken down, these are the relevant circumstances surrounding it, then I think it's perfectly fine not to recuse yourself. And
but unfortunately, we have no proof of any of that. I think me and Dan both said that, like...
You don't need proof. This isn't a court of law.
Well... Technically, it definitionally is a court of law, the highest law, technically, of all the land.
Oh my God! Okay.
But no. I mean, I'm just saying that if there was a video of Alito, like coming home from work and he sees his flag and he's like outside, like trying to tear it down, he's like screaming, like, "The fuck is going on out here?" Whatever. And then I'm like, oh shit, okay, he definitely didn't want this, right? But the fact that he's just writing in a letter and saying like, "Hey, listen, my wife hung this up. I asked her to take it down. Like, what am I supposed to do?" LOL. I don't know if I believe that or not. And I think a reasonable person could read that like, okay, yeah, I'm sure he's trying to save his ass now, or blame it on his wife and she's fine with it. That makes me really uncomfortable. I don't want to see people flying flags saying like, I'm going to support this policy position, and then they can just blame it on their wife and have a get out of jail free card.
Look at the time period here. The only reason he was writing this letter at all or responding to these is because of a New York Times article that dropped in May of this year. These events were from years ago, right? Well, 2023 was one of the flags, and the other flag was, I think, in 2021. But again, the time period lapse, right? To expect him to have evidence of that time period in which, again, no media was being done. And in fact, some media did have the story, but just didn't run it because they didn't think it was an issue. I think that's very unreasonable to expect him to have that kind of evidence just sitting there. So unless there is counter evidence that show he's lying in this case, then we kind of have to take him at his word. And if you I get that you don't believe him.
Here's a question: based on everything you know from Alito, okay? God comes down and God is holding a gun to your head, and God is saying, "I need you, Wick, to guess." Do you think that Alito agrees with the Stop the Steal movement, or do you think he's opposed to it? What do you think? How would you answer? Like, what percentage would you give there on that?
Whether I think that he probably has some sympathies in regards to the Stop the Steal movement. Yeah.
So, like, over 50% supports it, or?
Oh, sure. Why not? 55, 60, 75, something like that, right?
Okay. I think any reasonable person would say, obviously, Alito, yeah, probably most likely supports the
Probably.
Stop the Steal movement,
But
sure.
we don't require justices not to have opinions on things.
No, but we don't
Or
expect them to
political
show them publicly because it would
Yes,
threaten the
that's
impartiality of the
true.
court or the perceived impartiality of the court.
I agree. And he didn't show it publicly. His wife did. It
It's
wasn't him.
okay. Maybe
Which is the difference here. That's the difference.
I don't agree.
It
I don't
was-
think there is a substantial difference there, but
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, buddy. Is there anything else on this that you had or you wanted to take me on? I think we've reached a wall here.
We have
Does
indeed.
any of your strongest soldiers want to come in and fight me on this? I don't know.
I don't know. Dan might want to.
Okay. Dan had a interesting he lit like I watched him do this live. He made up a story in his head. Okay. Sans any evidence, and then he challenged Pisco on it and told Pisco he was retarded if he didn't believe his made up story.
Damn.
That's what happened. I watched this happen live, right? So if Dan wants to come in and talk, I would be more than happy. Or if Josiah, I know I already beat Josiah in Boy. I had a debate with them on this very subject weeks ago, which is why Josiah probably brought it up to you. He was licking his wounds, right? Still mauling over his very large, yes. But if any of them want to jump on in, we'll open it up. Or if anyone thinks Destiny's stupid, and wants to take him on, yeah, we can open this up a little bit because I think we've gone the rounds on this. In Pursuit of Knowledge for $10 says, I can't believe Wick, the same guy that says if his wife made a cake he didn't want, he has every right to be angry at her. And now Wick is defending a wife flying a flag that this man didn't want. Not defending it. I am saying that it was taken down, and Alito didn't want it, asked it to take it down, and he took it down. And I guess while we're waiting for people, let me ask you this: do you worry, Destiny, that making these accusations against Alito, right? Making these accusations against the Supreme Court, saying it's been obliterated. Do you worry that it is eroding trust in the institution?
It's already at an all-time low.
But this is not helping with people's trust.
I think they're not helping themselves. I think maybe we should have some reforms and some changes.
What would be your number one reform that you do the Supreme Court?
I think some sort of like mandatory ethics things are probably important. I do think that some kind of term limit stuff is probably important as well. One Supreme Court justice per president or two per president or something like that would probably be good. Yeah.
Like what kind of that's very broad, like a term limit. I go back and forth on term limits. On the one hand, I understand that maybe a lifetime appointment can run into some issues. But what would be the mechanism that we'd have in place if we went to term limits that would keep a justice from having a company come to them and saying, hey, buddy, Justice Alito, okay, we have a on the docket right now.
I don't think term limits. I don't think term limits are for keeping the justices impartial. I like term limits because it ensures an even selection from presidential elections of Supreme Court justices. That's why I like term limits.
Fair, but then the problem becomes the issue of them being more susceptible to political pressure, bribes, etc.
Well, I think them being more bribable is when they are is if they're like running for re-election. It's not like you could have your term end and then you could run for election again, right?
Well, no, you'd have your term end and then you'd get to serve a cush consulting job on the company that you.
You can do that right now.
I don't think they serve consulting jobs. There are issues.
Wait. You can do what you're saying right now. They could do right now. No.
Are they allowed? Does anyone know? In chat,
why would you not be?
know
Yeah, what's to keep Alito from just retiring right now and then going to work on a consulting firm?
Good question. I don't actually know.
Yeah, you could do that right now if you want.
Good question. Fair enough. I do know that currently they do get book deals. They do get all expenses paid vacations, right? Ruth Bader Ginsburg got an all expense paid vacation to Israel after she ruled on a case regarding her benefactor's company, and this happens all across the political spectrum. Clarence Thomas has a lot of accusations of this. Alito has some accusations of this. um, Gernsberg. What's his name? Gornsberg? How do you say that fucking name? The guy's name starts with a G.
Gorsuch?
Gorsuch. Thank you. Gorsuch actually, the company that bought his house after he becomes Supreme Court judge, was something that he ruled on a case regarding. So this happens all the time. And I think that the fact that we're focusing on the flag stuff and calling for recusals there, while we got justices all across the ideological spectrum getting all expenses paid trips, and we're just mum's the word on that, it frustrates me, my friend.
I would have to see more, especially being in the industry. When somebody says all expenses paid trip, that could mean a lot of different things depending on what we're talking about. So like, because I was curious, I just looked at this RBG thing, and it says that she was awarded a Lifetime Achievement Award by the Genesis Prize Foundation. Shortly following the award ceremony, she disclosed being provided transportation, food, and lodging as a tourist and guest of billionaire Israeli businessman Morris Khan. If she's being provided transportation, food, and lodging, this is like cost for an airplane ticket and then your hotel and food while you're there. That's like standard compensation for literally anything. You're always going to be compensated that. Otherwise, you'd never be able to travel anywhere to accept any reward or award or literally do anything, because you're not going to pay your own way for every single place you're going. But also, I don't think it's reasonable to assume that you're being bribed because somebody's giving you an airplane ticket and hotel and food to some other place. Like, I think accepting gifts or cash, I think, is a much bigger deal than that.
What if they buy your mother's house?
Yeah, that would be a big deal. I think that's probably not okay.
Thousands of dollars into it, and then let the mom live there rent free.
Yeah, I think that'd probably be not good. That would be a gift.
Yeah. Well, that happens. Or if you get an Indonesian vacation on a private jet and a super yacht, that would probably be something that maybe it's a little above the. It's a trip worth $500,000 to be clear, right? Yeah, yes, I understand what you're saying, and there's might be some reasonable things here, but again, across the ideological spectrum, we see this happen again and again and again, where they're just getting these lavish gifts from billionaires and millionaires, and then also ruling on stuff that shares an interest with these millionaires and billionaires.
I guess. I don't agree as these being, like, I'm just reading this. Like, Justice Samuel Alito disclosed 6 trips, including trips to Rome, Italy, and Zurich, Switzerland for university conferences, disclosing 13 trips. And then this, like, for Alito there, if he's getting paid to go to Rome, Italy, to Rome or Zurich for university conferences, like, that's fine. Like, if he's getting like his ticket and he's getting like a hotel room to do like a speech or whatever, like, I don't think this is like a huge problem. I don't think it's a problem at all. That's fine. It's if people are being provided gifts.
Wild to me that you think that the flag thing is more of a problem than this.
Okay, I think that one is like very clearly a problem and the other is very easily defensible. Like, on the flip side, do you think that if somebody, let's say that I invite, well, let's say I've got a canvassing event coming up. Let's say that I want to invite a Supreme Court justice to come and give a speech at our canvassing event. Okay. Do you think that I'm not allowed to cover their flight and hotel, that they should have to cover that on their own?
No, I think that would be fine as long as it's reported.
So then these things were. So then what's the difference between that and what I've just read for Alito here, that he had university conferences? Yeah.
Because again, these aren't the only trips that they're taking. And if you were flying them out on a super yacht, right? I think that would be, I would have questions, right? Like, okay. And especially, like, so say you have a court case coming up, okay? And it's going to be coming in front of the Supreme Court. Do you think that changes the situation where you're offering to fly them out to speak at your conference and offering to pay them room and board?
I'm not sure. It's not a big advantage that you're getting flown out somewhere. Like, what do you... Like, I'm definitely going to roll, because these guys are offering to fly me out. They're going to pay $2,000 on my plane ticket and hotel that I'm going to, like I said, if you're getting gifts, I think that's a big deal. If you're not disclosing anything, that's obviously a huge deal. If you're getting money, that's a huge deal. But you're getting like an airplane ticket and a hotel comped for you. Like, these are standard business expenditures for every single person around the world that flies or does anything for business or gives speeches or accepts awards or whatever.
Yes, but you can understand how someone so they rule on the case regarding Destiny versus Hassan, right? You finally went to the Supreme Court. It went up the thing. and they ruled on it. And then later on, people found out
Mm-hmm.
that you had bought him an all expenses paid trip to speak at your conference. Don't you think that that would cast a little bit of a doubt on the impartiality in the ruling of the Supreme Court?
No, I don't think so.
No?
I think that if I were to see somebody, if I were to
Good.
see that like this guy had to rule on me and that he had gotten flown out, by Hassan to give a speech in like some LA thing, I would be thinking like, oh fuck this motherfucker. He always agreed with Hassan. Fuck this dude. Right now, if Hassan awarded him like a 1 week vacation through Italy, well, that would be a lot different. I'd be like, wait, hold on. This guy's literally giving you vacations? The fuck?
It's not a vacation. They just happened to have the speaking event in Italy. It happened to last a week, and obviously
Those
this is
things
just-
you're talking about totally different things right now. Like even the term all expenses paid, like every single podcast I've ever done, well, I'm sorry, that's not true. But most of them in the past 2 years have been all expenses paid. But these aren't vacations for me. They just cover the hotel, they cover the flight, and maybe they'll stipend me for food. But that's not like an exquisite vacation, right? These are way different than like, oh, I'll send you, through Italy for a week. That's a way different thing.
The point is that it casts doubt on the impartiality of the justice in a way that I think is far above and beyond someone's wife flying a flag. Josiah has paid some money to do some super chats, so we're going to do that. $10 from Pondering Politics to say late to this, and I don't know if you discussed it yet, but you and Stephen had major disagreements about court reform in general. You could explore that if the flag topic has run its course. $10 more to say, or what Democrats are permitted to do politically against bad faith Republicans. Major disagreement there. Testing out suggestions. Well, thank you. I think we're having a great conversation. But suggestions are always welcome. And Josiah, if you want to jump on, feel free. But yeah, I think that if we are looking at what a reasonable person can expect, right, or what a reasonable person would expect that, there might be some doubt on whether this can be partial or impartial or not. I think that finding out that a company had given you had paid your way, right, to go to a conference in Italy and speak at a conference casts more doubt for me than a justice wife.
Wait, like give an example. Like give an example for this. So let's say
Sure.
that ExxonMobil has a case before the Supreme Court, and let's say that like 2 weeks or a month or two before, there's some conference in fucking Rome or Paris or some bullshit, right? And they're invited to speak on behalf of I don't know, whatever, however they feel, fossil fuels. I don't even know what the fuck you would invite somebody like this to speak out on for.
Me neither, which would make it a little weird. Or a pharmaceutical company, right? A pharmaceutical company invites maybe they know one of the justices.
Okay, so then here's a question. Is there even an example of a trip like this happening? Because most of the things I'm reading in this article all seem like universities. Like they're being invited to speak. Like for Samuel Alito, it was in Rome, Italy, and Zurich, Switzerland for university conferences. For Justice Sonia Sotomayor, traveled to a number of universities for award ceremonies and conferences. Elena Kagan gave a number of speeches at universities. Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh took 4 trips. Padua, Italy, as part of a George Mason University educational program. Like,
here's an easy one.
Okay.
And this Justice Clarence Thomas, and I'll send you a link to it too. 20 years, and this happened year after year for 20 years. Justice Clarence Thomas has been treated to luxury vacations by billionaire Republican donor Harlan Crow.
I need
Goes on cruises.
Wait. I need information. You're not telling me anything. Wait. You're not telling me anything. What is the vacation? What are we talking about?
I'm looking this up right now. So in 2019, right after the U.S. Supreme Court released its final opinion on the term, Justin Clarence Thomas boarded a large private jet headed to Indonesia. He and his wife were going on vacation, 9 days of island hopping in a volcanic archipelago on a super yacht staffed by a coterie of attendants and a private chef. If he had chartered the plane and the 162-foot yacht himself, the total cost of the trip would have exceeded $500,000. Fortunately for him, that wasn't necessary. He was on vacation with real estate.
Okay, wait. So this sounds like way different in kind than somebody just getting invited to like make a speech somewhere, right? This sounds like he just literally got to go on a $500,000 vacation.
Yes. But it was in a statement, Crow acknowledged that he'd extended hospitality to the Thomases over the years, but said that Thomas never asked for any of it and was no different from the hospitality we would have extended to many of our other dear friends, right? But
What is?
You-
Yeah.
does that raise any red flags? The fact that he'd been getting vacations for 20 years about this from this guy.
I mean, I don't know what this guy's associated with, but if any companies, or maybe if this guy was brought before the Supreme Court in some way, I maybe would question the impartiality. Yeah, for sure. But also, again, this is like a far different type of thing in kind than the university speeches and getting your room and plane comped. Also, was he disclosing these, or were these undisclosed?
I'm looking.
Because if these weren't disclosed, that's probably because it's looking like, because I'm looking at this ProPublica article you're talking about, it sounds like this is not disclosed. For more than 2 decades, Thomas has accepted luxury trips virtually every year from the Dallas businessman without disclosing them. So that's the issue. This has nothing to do with impartiality or anything. I think this just sounds like an issue with a lack of disclosure. And the lack of disclosure, I think, is probably a really big deal. I would say that even if you're giving university speeches, if you're not disclosing, that's probably a big deal. But if you are disclosing, I don't know if I would have an issue with Thomas's stuff here. I'd have to see like what political situations are being implicated. But the lack of disclosure is pretty worrying.
Yeah. My point here with all of this is that this kind of thing happens a lot, and we're finding out more and more about this. And this is, again, across the ideological spectrum that we see these. We know about the ones that they disclose, but they're not required technically to disclose a lot of them, right? So how we don't know. There were some like 1,309 Supreme Court justices trips that Supreme Court justices took, and between 2004 and 2019, and you can find this on the Open Secrets website. I don't know. You might think they all just stayed at a Holiday Inn, right? And they were just getting the bare minimum. But I do think that there is questions that could be raised, even if a university they're treating you to the 5-star hotels, right? When you're down there speaking, when they're doing all this for you. Yes, there is this argument can be made. Oh, that's just a business expense anyone gets. But the fact that you are ruling on cases involving them, I don't know, it lends a little fucky-wucky. It feels fucky-wucky to me. Does that make sense?
Sure, maybe, yeah.
I guess. I don't know. Like, this is one of those things where it's, I don't know, the differences I'm seeing between how you're treating this information and the differences.
We're not even talking about anything of substance right now, right? You're painting over this with such a broad brush. Like, is the implication, because I asked you earlier, is the implication that if any Supreme Court justice is invited to speak to a university, they always have to pay their own way? Is that what the expectation should be? Or should it be that nobody ever gives any speeches ever? Or that when you're a Supreme Court justice, nobody's allowed to comp a flight? Like, and then you're talking about this in the same breath that you're talking about Alito taking $500,000 9-day vacations. These are totally different types of things.
A big statement here that I think that if a court case comes across your desk as a Supreme Court justice and you have received paid trips, right, to speaking events on this, I think that there is a stronger argument that you should recuse yourself for that than the argument against Alito recusing himself for flying a flag, or his wife flying a flag.
So if Harvard invites you to speak, and so they give you a hotel room and they pay for your flight, you're not allowed to rule on like the affirmative action case?
I think that there's a stronger argument for that than there is for Alito recusing himself. Now, I don't think either should be required to recuse themselves, to be clear. But I think that the argument that someone would have for you can't rule in the case involving Harvard because they paid your way and gave you a trip, right, and put you up in a hotel room, all this, then your wife flew a flag.
Okay. I disagree, but...
Okay, we disagree. So, $5 from Brian Grieber. A reasonable person would assume they've had a conversation beforehand. This isn't a mistake you should be able to make even once without recourse. I don't know, right? It probably never came up beforehand, right? There's very few situations I could imagine where you'd fly a normal flag or a flag where there would be a court case where you flying that flag would signal, I don't know, allegiance to a side, other than maybe the American flag or veterans flag. And I think it's fairly reasonable to fly we support our troops or an MIA flag, right? I don't know.
Okay. All right. Well, I need to go down and start getting ready for my show. So I love you, Wick.
Thank you for taking the time. I've enjoyed this conversation, and I just ask. All I'll ask in closing is that you take a beat and maybe give a little bit more good faith to conservatives in this trying time. They're going through a hard time. Their dear leader Trump got shellacked last night, got destroyed, and they may need your support. Okay, buddy?
That's okay. They can learn to be more ethical and more moral, and then we'll accept them back into the fold. So
Okay. I'll see you later, Destiny.
have
Bye.
fun. Bye. Wow.